Okay, so have you ever felt like, your brain just won't shut off? Like it's stuck kind of replaying these old conversations or worrying about things you can't control? Well, that, my friend, is what we call overthinking, and it can be a real drag. But don't worry, there are ways to break free from those thought loops. But first, what exactly is overthinking? Basically, it's dwelling on something way too much, like a broken record in your head. And here's the tricky part. It can feel productive. You think, hey, I'm analyzing everything, I'm going to solve this. But really, it's just making you more anxious. Think of it like this, worrying about a storm versus actually prepping for it. One's all action, the other's just, well, worry. So are you an overthinker? If you're always rehashing conversations, imagining the worst, feeling mentally drained, yeah, you might be stuck in that overthinking trap. And it's not just annoying, it can really mess with your well-being. Experts have found a link between overthinking and stuff like anxiety, depression, even insomnia. It's like your brain's stuck on this negative loop, pumping out stress hormones. No wonder you can't sleep or focus. But hey, good news, you can learn to break free. And it starts with figuring out, well, why do we do it in the first place? Often it's rooted in, our fears and insecurities, like maybe you're afraid of messing up, making the wrong choice, or you're always looking for approval from others. Sometimes it's about trying to control things we just can't. Now, let's get into the different types of overthinking. Recognizing your own patterns is like the first step to changing them. One common one is all or nothing thinking. It's like seeing things in black and white, no gray areas. You're either good or bad, a success or failure. That kind of rigid thinking can make you feel trapped, hopeless. Then there's catastrophizing, where your mind jumps to the worst possible outcome. It's like having this disaster movie playing in your head, nonstop. Spilled coffee, my whole day's ruined. Small disagreement, they hate me, I've lost them forever. Drama much. But that's how overthinking works, blowing things way out of proportion. And lastly, there's overgeneralizing. This is where you take one bad experience and apply it to, like, your whole life. Get rejected from a job. I'm not good enough, I'll never get hired. Fight with your partner. All relationships are doomed, I'll never find love. Whoa, hold on. Those are some pretty sweeping statements, right? And they're not only untrue, they can really hold you back. So now that we've seen these overthinking patterns, what can we actually do about them? Well, the first step is simple. Just notice when you're doing it. Pay attention to those thoughts. See which ones are triggering those mental loops. And once you've spotted them, start questioning them. Is that thought really true? What evidence do you have? Is there another way to see it? This thought-challenging thing can be super powerful. You start to see things more realistically instead of just believing those negative thoughts. It's like taking back control of your mind. Another trick, and this might sound weird, is to schedule worry time. Yeah, you heard that right. Set aside like 15 minutes each day just to worry. Sounds counterintuitive, but it helps contain those thoughts instead of them running wild all day. Think of it like doing laundry. You don't leave dirty clothes all over the place, right? You have a hamper for that. Well, worry time is like your hamper for anxious thoughts. During that time, go all in. Write them down, explore them, see if you can find solutions. But when the timer goes off, that's it. Move on. Focus on something else. This can really help manage those intrusive thoughts so they don't take over your whole life. Now let's talk about distraction. Not about ignoring your problems, but sometimes you need a break. Do something you enjoy, something that makes you feel present. Read a book, go for a walk, hang out with loved ones. Anything to shift your focus away from those ruminations. And speaking of shifting focus, exercise can be a game changer. It releases those feel-good endorphins, busts stress, clears your head. So next time you're stuck in your head, go for a run, hit the gym, do some yoga. You'll be surprised how much it helps. And finally, let's not forget about mindfulness. It's about paying attention to the present moment without judgment. Notice your thoughts and feelings, but don't get swept away by them. There are tons of ways to practice, like meditation, yoga, even just focusing on your breath. Find what works for you and make it a habit. As you become more mindful, you'll notice you have more control over your thoughts. You can observe them without getting totally caught up. It's like creating space between you and your thoughts, so you can choose how to respond. And hey, it takes practice. Don't get discouraged if your mind wanders. Just gently guide it back without judgment. With time, you're able to stay more grounded in the present and less caught up in those worry loops. Now let's get a little more technical, shall we? Have you ever heard of cognitive diffusion? It might sound fancy, but it's a powerful tool for breaking free from overthinking. Remember that sports announcer analogy? Cognitive diffusion is kind of like that. It's about separating yourself from your thoughts, realizing they're not always the truth. Think of your mind as a radio, always broadcasting. Some channels are helpful, others are just static. Cognitive diffusion is about learning to tune into the good stuff and ignore the noise. You don't have to believe everything you think. So how do you actually do it? Well, one way is to simply label those thoughts. Instead of, I'm a failure, try, I'm having the thought that I'm a failure. It sounds simple, but it creates distance. You see it as a thought, not a fact. Another trick is to use metaphors. Imagine your thoughts as leaves floating down a stream or cars passing by. They're temporary, not permanent. And hey, sometimes a little humor helps. Say that negative thought in a silly voice or picture it as a cartoon character. Changing the way you frame it can take away its power. Now let's talk about writing things down. Sometimes getting those worries out of your head and onto paper can really help. It's like you're taking them from your inner world to the outer world, where they seem less scary. Keep a journal, make a list, create a mind map, whatever works for you to get those thoughts out. And once they're down, you can look at them more objectively. Are those worries realistic? Is there any evidence? Are there other ways to see things? Writing can bring clarity and perspective. Okay, so we've talked about recognizing overthinking patterns, challenging thoughts, distraction, mindfulness. But there's another biggie we need to address: how overthinking affects our relationships. Because let's be real, when you're stuck in your head, it's hard to be present with the people you love. And that can lead to some complications. So let's dive into that next. Yeah, the overthinking can really mess with our relationships. When we're stuck in our heads, second-guessing everything, imagining all these worst-case scenarios, it's tough to be present, to really connect with the people we care about. One way this shows up is through, constant reassurance seeking. When you're always asking your partner, do you still love me? Are you sure you're happy? Even though they've given you zero reason to doubt them. It comes from our own insecurities, right? But it can put so much pressure on the relationship. It's like you're testing their love all the time instead of just trusting it. And then there's the overanalyzing. The overanalyzing. It's like dissecting every single word, every text, every little look, searching for some hidden meaning, like something's wrong. Why didn't they text back right away? Maybe they don't care anymore. Did they losing interest? Our minds can spin these crazy stories, creating drama out of thin air. And all that can lead to, miscommunication, arguments, a ton of stress. It's like you're looking for problems, even when they don't exist. And honestly, you might end up creating the very problems you're so worried about. Another way overthinking sabotages relationships is through, jealousy and possessiveness. Feeling threatened by your partner's friends or when they talk to other people, even if there's nothing suspicious going on. This usually comes from low self-confidence or fear of being abandoned. It's like you're projecting your own insecurities onto them, creating this whole dynamic of distrust and control. But hey, don't worry, there's good news. You can learn to manage these anxieties and build healthier, happier relationships. The first step is to really address those underlying insecurities that are fueling the overthinking fire. Work on your self-esteem. Challenge those negative thoughts that tell you you're not good enough. Build up your self-worth. Remember, a strong, loving relationship starts with a strong, loving relationship with yourself. When you feel good about yourself, when you trust in your own value, you're less likely to need that constant validation from outside. Another important thing is to talk to your partner. Really talk. Be open and honest about your anxieties. Let them know what you're feeling, what triggers those feelings, and help them understand and support you. And setting boundaries is key too. Respect each other's space. Have your own friends and interests. Don't feel like you need to check in or control each other all the time. Trust is the foundation, right? When you trust your partner, when you feel secure in their life, you're less likely to get trapped in those overthinking spirals. Now, if you're finding it tough to handle those relationship anxieties on your own, don't hesitate to reach out for help. A therapist can give you the tools and strategies to manage those thoughts and build a stronger, more fulfilling relationship. Okay, so we've talked about what overthinking is, why we do it, how it messes with our relationships. Now let's get practical. How do we actually stop overthinking and start living more peacefully right here, right now? Well, one powerful tool is distraction. And I don't mean just zoning out or ignoring your problems. I mean intentionally shifting your focus onto something positive and engaging. Lose yourself in a good book, Go for a walk in nature. Spend time with people you love. Anything that brings you joy and helps you feel present. Exercise is amazing for this too. It releases those feel-good endorphins, reduces stress, clears your head. So yeah, next time you're stuck in your head, go for a run, hit the gym, try some yoga. It can make a huge difference. Now let's talk about something that might sound a little counterintuitive. Scheduling time for reflection. I know, scheduling time to worry. It sounds crazy, right? But here's the thing. When you set aside a specific time each day to process those anxieties, you're basically containing them. You're not letting them run wild all day long. It's like, think about your laundry. You don't just leave dirty clothes scattered everywhere, right? You have a hamper to keep them contained until laundry day. Well, worry time is like your hamper for anxious thoughts. So during that time, give yourself permission to worry. Write it down, explore those feelings, see if you could find solutions. But when that time's up, that's it. Move on. Focus on something else. This could be super helpful in managing those intrusive thoughts so they don't take over your whole life. Okay, now let's explore another powerful tool, mindfulness. It's all about paying attention to the present moment without judgment. Notice your thoughts and feelings, but don't get swept away by them. Just observe. There are so many ways to practice mindfulness. Meditation apps, yoga classes, even just taking a few moments to focus on your breath. Find what works for you and make it a regular thing. As you get better at mindfulness, you'll start to realize you have more control over your thoughts than you thought. You can observe them without getting completely tangled up in them. It's like creating some breathing room between you and those thoughts, so you can choose how to respond instead of just reacting automatically. And remember, mindfulness is a skill. It takes practice. Don't get discouraged if your mind wanders at first. Just gently bring it back to the present without judgment. The more you practice, the easier it gets to stay grounded in the present and avoid those overthinking spirals. Now let's move on to a technique that might sound a little strange at first, but trust me, it can be really effective. Cognitive diffusion. So, cognitive diffusion. It's kind of like, remember I mentioned that sports announcer thing? It's kind of like that. It's about, not taking our thoughts so seriously. Realizing they're not always like the absolute truth about us or the world. It's like, imagine your mind is this radio, right? It's always playing, always broadcasting these thoughts. Some of them are helpful, informative, like good music, but others are just static noise, And cognitive diffusion is about learning to tune into those helpful stations, the good stuff, and kind of tuning out the ones that aren't serving us. You don't have to believe everything you think. So how do we actually do this? Well, one way is to just label your thoughts as, thoughts. Instead of thinking, ugh, I'm such a failure, try saying to yourself, I'm having the thought that I'm a failure. It's subtle, but it creates a little distance. You see it as a thought, not like this big, scary fact. Another trick. Metaphors. Try picturing your thoughts as like leaves flowing down a stream or cars going by on the highway. They come and go. They're not permanent. And hey, sometimes a little humor can help. Seriously. Try saying that negative thought in a second voice, or imagine it as like a cartoon character. Sometimes just changing the way you think about it can take away its power. Now let's talk about something super simple. Writing it down. Sometimes just getting those worries out of your head and onto paper can make a huge difference. It's like you're, transferring those thoughts from your inner world to the outside, where they seem less overwhelming. Keep a journal, make a list, draw a mind map, whatever works for you. And once those thoughts are out there, you can look at them more objectively. Are they really that big of a deal? What evidence do you have? Are there other ways to look at things? Writing can really help you see things more clearly. Okay, so we've talked about different overthinking patterns, challenging those negative thoughts, using distraction, practicing mindfulness, even writing things down. But there's one more big piece of the puzzle I want to touch on. Relationship anxiety. This is when those overthinking tendencies, creep into our romantic relationships, causing a whole lot of unnecessary stress and worry. A big sign of this is like constantly needing reassurance from your partner. You find yourself asking things like, do you still love me, or are you happy? Even though they haven't given you any reason to doubt them. And it usually comes from insecurity, right? Or maybe a fear of being abandoned. It's like you're constantly looking for proof that the relationship is okay, even though that reassurance should really come from within. Another thing that happens is, overanalyzing. Reading into every little thing your partner does, every text, every facial expression, every slight change in their behavior. You're searching for hidden meanings, for signs that something's wrong. And that can be so exhausting, not just for you, but for your partner too. It creates this tension, this feeling like you're always walking on eggshells, just waiting for something bad to happen. Relationship anxiety can also lead to jealousy and possessiveness, feeling threatened by your partner's friendships or when they talk to other people, even if there's nothing to be suspicious about. This often stems from, a lack of self-confidence or a fear that you're not good enough. It's like you're constantly comparing yourself to others and feeling like you come up short. Now, if you're dealing with relationship anxiety, know that you're not alone. It's actually pretty common, and there are ways to manage it to build a more secure and happy relationship. The first step is to really work on those insecurities that are driving the anxiety. Build up your self-esteem. Urge those thoughts that tell you you're not worthy of love. Remember, a healthy, loving relationship starts with you. When you feel good about yourself, you're less likely to need that constant reassurance from outside. It's also important to talk to your partner, honestly and openly. Let them know what's going on, what makes you anxious. This helps them understand and support you. Setting boundaries is crucial too. Respect each other's space. Have your own friends and interests. Don't feel the need to control each other. Trust is so important, right? When you trust your partner, when you feel secure in their love, you're less likely to get caught in those overthinking spirals. And if you're finding it tough to manage those relationship anxieties on your own, don't be afraid to reach out for help. A therapist can help you work through those feelings and build a stronger, happier relationship. So we've covered a lot today. We've explored what overthinking is, why we do it, how it affects our lives and our relationships, and most importantly, we've talked about strategies to break free from those mental loops, to stop the constant worrying, and start living more fully in the present moment. Remember, overthinking is common, but it doesn't have to control you. You can learn to manage it. It takes practice, it takes patience, but you can do it. So keep exploring those techniques, find what works for you, and keep moving forward. You've got this.